They had watched the stars for 10,000 years. They had studied 2,847 species across the galaxy. They measured everything. They counted everything. Every breath, every blink, every tiny movement of every creature they found. Data was their god and numbers were their prayers. When humans first made contact with the collective, the tall beings were curious. Humans were loud. Humans were messy. Humans leaked water from their eyes and made strange noises with their mouths when they were happy. They did not understand any of it, but they wanted to learn. Learning was what they did best. The observation station called Eternal Meridian floated in the dark space between two galaxies. It was massive, cold, and perfectly organized. Every wall was white. Every light was the same brightness. Every sound was measured and controlled. The who lived there spent their days watching screens and writing reports. They had been doing this for centuries. Doctor arrived on a small human shuttle on a Tuesday morning by Earth time. She was 32 years old, with black hair cut short and eyes that seemed to notice everything. She was humanity's first diplomatic liaison to the chosen because she was calm, smart, and very patient. She would need all three qualities in the months ahead. The moment she stepped off her shuttle, they surrounded her. They were tall and thin, with skin like smooth stone and eyes that never blinked. They did not greet her or welcome her. Instead, they attached sensors to her body. Small metal circles pressed against her wrists, her neck, her temples, her chest. 47 sensors in total, each one recording something different about her biology. Let them do it. She smiled politely while they worked. She understood that this was how they showed interest. They did not shake hands or bow or hug. They measured. That was their way of saying hello. Lead observer watched from across the docking bay. He was older than the others, with darker skin and a voice like grinding rocks. He had studied 400 species in his lifetime. Humans were number 401. He found them fascinating in their waste. Human hearts beat constantly, pushing blood through their bodies every single second of every single day. They had different biology. Their blood moved through reservoirs that pulsed only when needed, saving energy. A heart might beat 10 times in an hour. A human heart beats 70 times in a single minute. So much effort, so much work, so much beautiful, pointless inefficiency. Assigned his best junior observer to the human project. Her name was Myra, and she was young by standards, only 200 years old. She had never seen a human before. She had only read about them in data files. Now she would spend every day watching one. Myra set up her monitoring station in a small room next to his quarters. Screens covered every wall, each one showing different numbers: heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, brain activity, hormone levels, sleep patterns, stress indicators. Myra watched them all, recording everything in her careful notes. For the first 3 months, the data was boring. Humans were predictable creatures, Myra discovered. Woke up at the same time every day. Her heart rate was always between 68 and 75 beats per minute when she was resting. It went up when she exercised in the station's small gym. It went up when she drank the bitter black liquid she called coffee. It went up when she received messages from Earth that made her eyes leak water. Myra learned to predict every spike, every dip, every tiny change in the human's biology. She began to think that humans were not very interesting after all. They were just machines made of meat, running the same programs over and over again. Eat, sleep, work, repeat. The numbers told the whole story. There was nothing mysterious about them. Then the supply ship arrived, and everything changed. Lieutenant came aboard the Eternal Meridian on a cold morning in the station's artificial winter. He was a supply officer, responsible for bringing food, medicine, and equipment from Earth to the distant station. He was 29 years old, with a kind face and a laugh that echoed through the metal hallways. He was supposed to stay for 2 weeks while his ship was repaired. Myra did not pay much attention to him at first. He was just another human, another set of heartbeats to ignore. She focused on, as she always did, watching the familiar numbers scroll across her screens. Then walked into the observation deck to review trade documents, and Lieutenant walked in to deliver cargo manifests, and Myra saw something she had never seen before. The moment their eyes met across the room, his heart rate jumped from 71 to 89 beats per minute. There was no threat in the room. There was no physical activity. There was no logical reason for the change. But the numbers did not lie. Something had happened inside the human's chest, something Myra could not explain. She leaned closer to her screens, watching carefully, was walking toward now. They were introducing themselves, shaking hands in that strange human way, and as their fingers touched, Myra saw something impossible. His heart stopped. Not slowed, not skipped, stopped completely. For exactly 0.3 seconds, there was no heartbeat at all. The line on Myra's screen went flat. Then it jumped back to life at 94 beats per minute, fast and wild and completely unexplainable. Myra ran diagnostics on her sensors. They were working perfectly. She checked the data 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. The numbers were real. The pause had happened. She sat back in her chair and stared at the screens with something that might have been fear. In 200 years of observation, she had never seen anything like this. Hearts did not simply stop. Time did not simply pause. Biology did not break its own rules. But it had. She had watched it happen, and she had no idea why. Myra did not sleep that night. They did not need much sleep, only a few hours every few days, but Myra usually enjoyed the quiet rest. Not anymore. Now she sat in front of her screens, watching his heartbeat pulse across the display, waiting for another impossible moment. It came the next morning. Was eating breakfast alone in the station's dining hall. The room was large and empty, filled with white tables and white chairs and white lights that never flickered. She was reading something on her tablet, chewing slowly, her heart beating at a calm 69 beats per minute. Normal, predictable, boring. Then Lieutenant walked through the door, carrying his own breakfast tray, and everything changed again. Myra watched the numbers spike, had not even looked up yet. She had not seen him enter, but somehow her body knew he was there. Her heart jumped to 82 beats per minute before her eyes ever left her tablet. When she finally raised her head and saw him standing in the doorway, the number climbed to 91. Smiled and walked toward her table. He asked if he could sit with her. She said yes. And in that moment when she said that single word, Myra saw the pause again. 0.4 seconds this time. A complete stop. A gap in the data where nothing existed. Then the heartbeat returned, faster and stronger than before, racing like it had just run a marathon. Myra began taking detailed notes. She recorded the time, the location, the duration of every pause. She tracked the pattern of his heart rate throughout the day, marking every moment when it spiked or dropped. She created charts and graphs and models, trying to find some logic in the chaos. There was none. Over the next 2 weeks, Myra documented 847 anomalies. His heart misbehaved whenever was nearby. It raced when he laughed. It stuttered when he touched her arm. It paused completely when their eyes met across a crowded room. The pauses were getting longer too. 0.3 seconds became 0.5 seconds. 0.5 seconds became 0.7 seconds. Myra worried that eventually the pause would never end, that his heart would simply stop and never start again. But it always started again. Every single time the heartbeat returned, stronger than before, more alive than before, as if the pause was not a death but a rebirth. Myra did not understand. She decided to study as well. She approached him in the hallway one afternoon and explained that she needed to attach sensors to his body for research purposes. He agreed immediately, laughing and saying he was happy to help with science. Myra attached the sensors carefully, then returned to her monitoring station to watch. The results were even more confusing. His heart behaved exactly like it raced when she was near. It paused when their eyes met, and most impossible of all, their pauses happened at exactly the same moment. When's heart stopped, heart stopped. When's heart restarted, heart restarted. They were perfectly synchronized, two separate bodies beating as one. Myra ran the numbers again and again. The synchronization was too precise to be coincidence. It was not random chance or measurement error. Something real was happening between these two humans, something that connected their biology in ways that should not be possible. She brought her findings to lead observer. The old examined her data with careful attention. He scrolled through the charts, studied the graphs, read every note she had written. His face showed no emotion, but Myra could see his fingers twitching slightly. That was a sign of confusion among was confused. Her heart stops, Myra explained, but she does not die. Time seems to stop having meaning for her biology, and his heart does the same thing at the exact same moment. Was quiet for a long time. This should not be possible, he finally said. Cardiac function cannot suspend without consequence. The blood would stop flowing. The brain would begin to die. Even a pause of 1 second should cause damage. I know, but there is no damage. If anything, her health indicators have improved since he arrived. Lower stress hormones, better sleep, stronger immune response. The pauses should be killing her, but instead she is becoming healthier. Stared at the screens. Perhaps the sensors are wrong. I have checked them 17 times. They are working perfectly. Then perhaps there is something wrong with these humans. A defect. A disease we have not documented before. Myra shook her head. I do not think it is a disease. She does not seem sick. She seems. Myra searched for the right word. Happy. She seems happy. Made a sound like stones grinding together. It was the way of expressing frustration. Happiness does not stop hearts. Happiness does not break the laws of biology. I know, Myra said, but something is happening here that we do not understand. I think we need to ask more questions. I think we need to ask the humans directly. Considered this for a long moment. The preferred to observe from a distance. They did not like to interfere with their subjects, but this situation was different. This situation was impossible, and impossible things required unusual methods. Very well, said. We will ask them, but I want the entire scientific council present. If these humans are going to explain the unexplainable, I want everyone to hear it. Myra nodded and began preparing the meeting request. She did not know what answers the humans would give. She did not even know if they would have answers at all. But she knew one thing for certain. Something extraordinary was happening on the station, something that all her data and all her numbers could not capture. For the first time in 200 years of careful observation, Myra had found something that her science could not explain. She found that terrifying. She also found it wonderful. The scientific council met in the largest room on the station. 17 senior observers sat in a perfect circle, their faces still and serious. They had reviewed all of Myra's data before the meeting. They had run their own tests. They had checked every sensor, every number, every impossible pause in the heartbeat data. None of them could explain what they had found. And stood in the center of the circle. They looked small, surrounded by so many tall, but they did not seem afraid. Stood with her hands folded calmly in front of her, had his hands in his pockets, a slight smile on his face. They were standing close together, their shoulders almost touching. Myra watched her screens from her position at the edge of the room. Both humans had elevated heart rates. Both were showing signs of mild stress, but underneath the stress there was something else, something warm and steady that her instruments could not name. Lead observer spoke first. His voice filled the room like the sound of a distant storm. We have recorded your physiological responses to each other, he said. We have documented 847 anomalies in the past 14 days. Your hearts accelerate when you are near each other. Your hearts pause when you look at each other. By all our models and all our understanding of biology, you should both be dead. and looked at each other. Myra watched their heart rates spike. She watched the familiar pause happen, 0.6 seconds of nothing, then the restart. The 17 observers saw it happen on their own screens. Several of them made the grinding sound of confusion. "You are describing what happens when we look at each other?" asked. Her voice was calm and curious. She did not seem worried about the impossible things her body was doing. "Yes," said, "we require an explanation. What is wrong with your biology? What disease causes this behavior?" Laughed. The sound echoed through the silent room, bright and warm and completely out of place. The observers stared at him with their unblinking eyes. "I think you have just scientifically documented a crush," he said. The word did not translate. The interpreters tried several times, but they could not find a matching concept in their language. Crush meant pressure. Crush meant destruction. Crush meant something being broken into pieces. None of these meanings made sense in this context. "Explain this word," demanded. "Your translator says it means destruction, but you are not being destroyed. Your health indicators have improved." Smiled. It was a soft expression, gentle and patient. "In our language, a crush is what we call the beginning of romantic attraction. It is when you start to have feelings for another person. Strong feelings, overwhelming feelings." "Feelings do not stop hearts," one of the other observers said. "Feelings are electrochemical signals in the brain. They do not affect cardiac function." "In humans they do," said. "Our bodies and our emotions are not separate things. When we feel something strongly, our bodies respond. Fear makes our hearts race. Sadness slows them down. And attraction." She glanced at, and Myra watched the pause happen again. "Attraction can make our hearts do strange things." The observers murmured among themselves. This was not an answer that satisfied them. It explained nothing about the mechanism, the biology, the actual physical cause of the anomalies. It was not science. It was just words. Another observer spoke up. "You say this is attraction, but why does attraction cause cardiac suspension? What evolutionary purpose does this serve? A heart that stops is a vulnerability. Any predator could attack during that moment of weakness." Shrugged. "Maybe it is not about survival. Maybe it is about something more important." "There is nothing more important than survival," said. "All life exists to continue existing. That is the first law of biology." "I disagree," said quietly. The room fell completely silent. They did not interrupt or argue. They simply waited for her to continue. In all their years of studying other species, they had never heard anyone disagree with the first law. Took a breath. "Humans do not just want to survive. We want to connect. We want to be seen, to be known, to be understood by another person. That desire is so strong that it can override everything else, even our basic survival instincts. When I look at, my heart does not care about staying safe. It only cares about this moment, this feeling, this connection between us." "That is illogical," said. "Yes," agreed. "Love is not logical. That is what makes it so powerful." Myra looked down at her screens. The word love appeared in the translator database with dozens of definitions. Affection, devotion, deep attachment, strong positive emotion toward another being. None of the definitions captured what she was seeing in the data. None of them explained the pauses, the synchronization, the impossible way these two humans seemed to exist as one. "You use this word love," Myra said, speaking for the first time. All eyes turned to her. "But our translator cannot find a proper meaning. Can you explain it more clearly, in terms we can understand?" Thought about the question, reached out and took her hand. Their fingers intertwined, and Myra watched both their heart rates stabilize into the exact same rhythm. Beat for beat, pause for pause, perfect synchronization. "Love is when another person becomes more important than yourself," said. "When their happiness matters more than your own survival. When you would do anything, give anything, risk anything just to see them smile. It does not make logical sense. It does not follow the rules of biology. but it is the most real thing humans ever experience. She squeezed hand. When I look at him, time stops because nothing else matters. The universe becomes very small, just him and me, just this moment. My heart does not know what to do with that feeling, so it stops trying. It just pauses and waits, and then it starts again, stronger than before. The 17 observers sat in silence. For the first time in the meeting, none of them had questions. None of them had objections. They simply stared at the two humans standing hand in hand in the center of the room, and they realized that they were witnessing something their science had never prepared them for. Something that numbers could not capture, something that data could not explain. Something beautifully, impossibly human. After the council meeting, Myra could not stop thinking about the word love. She spent 3 days searching through every database that had ever created. She read studies of 2,847 species. She examined biological records spanning 10,000 years. She looked for any other creature that showed the same patterns as the humans. She found nothing. Some species showed pair bonding. Some showed protective instincts toward mates and offspring. Some even showed preference for specific individuals over others. But none of them displayed the impossible cardiac synchronization that and shared. None of them had hearts that stopped at the same moment. None of them seemed to exist in their own private universe whenever they looked at each other. Love, Myra realized, was something uniquely human, or at least this kind of love was, the kind that broke the rules, the kind that made no sense, the kind that terrified and amazed her in equal measure. She requested a private interview with. They met in a small observation room with a view of the distant stars. Sat by the window, her face lit by the soft glow of a nearby nebula. She looked peaceful. She looked happy. She looked like someone who had found something worth more than all the stars outside. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me," Myra said. "I have more questions. I hope you do not mind." "I do not mind at all. Ask anything you want." Myra organized her thoughts carefully. She had hundreds of questions, but she did not know where to begin. Finally, she chose the one that confused her most. "In the council meeting, you used a word for destruction to describe what happens between you and Lieutenant, Crush. But your body responds as if he is beneficial. Your stress hormones have decreased. Your sleep quality has improved. Your immune system is stronger than when you arrived. How can something called a crush be good for you?" Smiled at the question. The word crush is complicated. In English, it has many meanings. When we say someone has a crush, we mean they are overwhelmed by their feelings for another person. It is like being crushed by something heavy, but in a good way. The weight of emotion is so strong that you cannot think about anything else. That sounds unpleasant. It can be, admitted. But it can also be wonderful. Being overwhelmed by love is not the same as being hurt by it. You feel too much, but it is a beautiful kind of too much. Myra considered this. They did not like feeling too much of anything. They valued calm and control and careful measurement. The idea of choosing to be overwhelmed was strange to her, but she was beginning to understand that humans operated by different rules. "I have another question," she said. "The synchronization between your hearts. You and Lieutenant pause at exactly the same moment. You restart at exactly the same moment. How is this possible? You are two separate bodies. You have two separate nervous systems. How can you be so perfectly connected?" Looked out at the stars for a long moment. "I do not know the scientific explanation. Maybe there is no scientific explanation, but I can tell you what it feels like." She turned back to face Myra. "When I look at, I do not feel like a separate person anymore. I feel like part of something larger, something that includes both of us. Our hearts are not really stopping. They are just finding each other, synchronizing, becoming one rhythm instead of two." "But how? Your bodies are not physically connected. There is no mechanism for this kind of communication." "Maybe love is the mechanism," said softly. "Maybe there are connections between people that your sensors cannot measure, invisible threads that tie us together. When we find someone who matches us perfectly, those threads become visible. They become real. They make the impossible possible. Myra did not know what to say. This was not a scientific answer. It was not logical or measurable or predictable. It was exactly the kind of answer that they had spent 10,000 years trying to eliminate from their understanding of the universe. But sitting here, watching his face glow in the starlight, Myra found herself wanting to believe it. "One more question," she said. "The most important one. What does it feel like, this love you describe? What does it actually feel like inside your body?" Closed her eyes. For a moment she was quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was soft and full of wonder. "It feels like being seen, truly seen. Not just my face or my body, but everything I am inside. All my fears, all my hopes, all my secrets. Sees all of it, and he loves me anyway, maybe because of it." She opened her eyes. "And when he looks at me, I feel like I exist more than I ever have before. Like I was only half real until he came along. Like I was waiting my whole life for him without knowing it." She laughed quietly. "I know that sounds strange. I know it does not make logical sense, but that is what love is. It is the feeling that you have finally found where you belong, that you are home, that nothing else in the entire universe matters except this one person standing in front of you." Myra's screens showed steady heartbeat data, 72 beats per minute, calm and regular. But she knew that the moment walked into this room, everything would change. The numbers would spike. The pauses would happen. And for a few brief seconds, time itself would seem to stop. She had tallied every heartbeat. She had counted every pause. She had measured everything there was to measure. And she understood nothing. But maybe, she thought, that was okay. Maybe some things were not meant to be understood. Maybe some things were only meant to be felt. She looked at sitting in the starlight, and for the first time in 200 years, Myra wished she could feel something like that too. 6 months passed on the eternal meridian. Ship had been repaired long ago, but he did not leave. He requested a transfer to the station, and humanity's diplomatic council approved it. They said it was important to have more human presence on the observation post. They said it would help with relations. Everyone pretended that was the real reason. Myra continued her observations. She had filled 17 data files with information about heart rates, hormone levels, sleep patterns, brain activity. She had documented thousands of pauses, thousands of spikes, thousands of moments when their bodies seemed to break every rule of biology. The data was complete. The data was perfect. The data explained absolutely nothing. The final report went through 12 drafts. Every senior observer contributed their analysis. They argued about terminology. They debated classification systems. They spent weeks trying to find the right words to describe what they had witnessed. In the end, the report ran to 847 pages. It included spectral analyses and hormonal breakdowns and neural pathway mappings. It had 17 appendices filled with raw numbers. It was the most detailed study of human biology that had ever produced. The conclusion section contained a single paragraph. Myra wrote it herself, late one night when the station was quiet and the stars outside seemed closer than usual. She had spent 200 years learning to turn everything into data. Now she was learning that some things could not be turned into anything at all. Wrote, "Human cardiac function shows significant deviation from predicted models when subjects experience the state they call love. Heartbeats may accelerate, slow down, or stop entirely without any negative health effects. Most notably, 2 humans experiencing mutual attraction display synchronized cardiac anomalies that suggest a form of biological communication we cannot measure or explain. We have tallied every heartbeat. We have mapped every pause. We understand none of it." The humans themselves seem unconcerned by this gap in understanding. When asked why time appears to stop between affected individuals, subject doctor responded, "Because in that moment, nothing else exists. We are forced to conclude that human emotional bonding operates on principles outside our current scientific framework. Further study is recommended, though we suspect the phenomenon may be fundamentally resistant to quantification. The report was filed in the Great Archive, alongside studies of 2,847 other species. It would be read by researchers and students for thousands of years. They would examine the data and scratch their heads and wonder how hearts could stop without causing death. None of them would ever truly understand. Myra had accepted that now. 3 months after the report was filed, and asked to speak with Myra privately. They met in the same observation room where Myra had interviewed, with the same view of distant stars and glowing nebulae. "We have something to tell you," said. "We are getting married." Myra had encountered this word before. Marriage, a human bonding ritual, a ceremony where two people declared their intention to stay together for the rest of their lives. It seemed like a strange thing to announce publicly, but humans apparently found it very important. "Congratulations," Myra said, because that was what humans said in this situation. "I am happy for you." "We want you to come," said, "to the ceremony. You have been watching us for so long, it only seems right that you should be there when we make it official." Myra did not know what to say. They did not attend alien ceremonies. They observed from a distance. They took notes and collected data. They did not participate. But Myra had spent 6 months watching these two humans fall deeper in love. She had seen their hearts break every rule. She had documented the impossible over and over again. She felt connected to them in a way she had never felt connected to any research subject before. "I would be honored," she said. The ceremony took place in the station's largest observation deck. The room had been transformed. There were flowers that had grown in the station's small greenhouse. There were lights that had arranged in patterns that meant something to humans. There were other human crew members who had come to witness, and there were observers who had come because they were curious about this strange ritual. Myra stood at the edge of the crowd, her sensors recording everything as always, but she was not just collecting data anymore. She was watching, really watching, seeing the way his face glowed when she looked at, seeing the way his hands trembled slightly as he held hers, seeing the love between them like a physical force, invisible but undeniable. They spoke words to each other, promises, vows, things they already knew but needed to say out loud anyway. Then they exchanged small metal circles called rings, sliding them onto each other's fingers as symbols of their bond. Throughout the ceremony, Myra counted heartbeats. She could not help it. It was her nature. Heart, 2,847 beats during the ceremony. Heart, 2,847 beats exactly. Perfect synchronization from beginning to end. And 14 pauses. 14 moments when they looked at each other and time seemed to stop. 14 gaps in the data where nothing existed except the two of them. Myra did not include those pauses in her observation notes. She did not record them in any file. She did not add them to the Great Archive. Some data she had learned was not meant to be counted. After the ceremony, found Myra standing alone by the window. The stars burned bright outside, millions of them, each one a sun with its own planets and its own possibilities. "Thank you for coming," said. "Thank you for inviting me." They stood together in comfortable silence. Myra's screen showed heart rate, 76 beats per minute, calm, happy, at peace. "I have been thinking," Myra said slowly, "about everything I have learned from watching you, about love, about connection, about hearts that stop and restart." "And what have you concluded?" Myra looked at the human woman beside her, at the small metal ring on her finger, at the smile that had not left her face all day. "I have concluded that humans are remarkable," Myra said. "Not because your biology is special, not because you live longer or run faster or think smarter than other species. You are remarkable because you feel things so deeply that your bodies cannot contain it. You love so strongly that time itself has to stop and make room. His eyes were wet. Humans did that when they felt strong emotions. Water leaked from their eyes. It had confused Myra at first. Now she understood that it was beautiful. That might be the nicest thing anyone has ever said about us, said. It is simply the truth, Myra replied. The truth that numbers cannot capture. The truth that science cannot explain. The truth that I spent 6 months trying to understand and never will. She looked back out at the stars. Somewhere out there, on thousands of different worlds, other species were living and dying and trying to make sense of their existence. They would observe them all. They would count their heartbeats and measure their hormones and file their data in the great archive. But none of them, Myra suspected, would ever stop her heart the way these humans had stopped theirs. None of them would show her something so impossible and so beautiful that she would choose not to record it. None of them would teach her that some things were not meant to be tallied. They were only meant to be felt.